I uncovered a haunted diary of a medieval king. It reveals terrifying secrets of the throne. I never should have opened that door. The air was thick with potential horror, electric and heavy, like a storm brewing just out of sight. This was supposed to be just another boring day of sorting dusty old books in the library. Just a routine within the rusty walls of the castle, where whispers of forgotten histories floated like ghosts around me. But the moment I pulled the creaking door ajar, a shiver ran down my spine. Inside, darkness draped every corner. The cold seeped into my bones, wrapping me in a shroud of unease. I could hear my heart pounding, each beat echoing louder in the suffocating silence. The room smelled of aged parchment, and something else, something earthy, like damp earth waiting for rain. A wave of anxiety washed over me. One single flickering candle illuminated the dusty table at the center. And there it was, a diary bound in cracked leather. Ancient and ominous, it seemed to pulse with secrets, daring me to touch it. My hand reached out against my better judgment. As my fingers brushed the cover, a chill gripped my throat. Was this a trap? With trembling hands I opened the diary. The pages whispered of dark ceremonies and blood-stained crowns. Each word twisted around my mind, a tantalizing tease of scandal that made my breath itch. I learned of a king who made pacts with shadows, sacrificing his own brothers for the throne. A shudder ran through me. Could this be real? But then, the strange noises began. Faint scratching, like fingernails on wood, clawing from the corners of the dark room. I spun around, the fear rising like bile in my throat. Whispers wrapped around me, voices caught in a loop of despair, as if the very air was filled with trapped souls seeking release. The shadows danced, morphing into grotesque shapes that seemed to leer at me. I wanted to run, to slam the door and forget what I had discovered. But my feet were glued to the ground, rooted in dread. The air thickened, I could barely breathe. I squinted against the dim light, pushing myself to listen. What was happening? Then a sudden crash. Every nerve in my body screamed. A heavy thud resounded. Was it the door? Or something worse? My heart raced. I could feel sweat trickling down my back as adrenaline charged my muscles. I was about to turn and flee when a dark figure emerged from the shadows. Fear paralyzed me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. The figure stepped closer, its features hidden in darkness. It raised a hand, and I could feel the chill biting through the very fabric of my clothes. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure paused, its breath a frosty whisper against the silence, coiling around me like a serpent. I felt its intent, a weight as heavy as stone, pressing down upon my chest. I opened my mouth, desperate to cry out, but no sound escaped. My eyes strained against the shadows, searching for any sign of humanity. But what loomed before me was more specter than man. You summoned me, the figure rasped, its voice a low echo, reverberating in the recesses of my mind. The words felt less like a proclamation and more like a curse. No one can resist the call. A chaotic swirl of emotion coursed through me, fear mingled with a strange, intoxicating power. It was not merely the figure from the shadows, but the realization of the dark secrets in the diary that had conjured it. My fingers curled into helpless fists as adrenaline surged, the fight-or-flight instinct waging war within. Just then, a cacophony of whispers erupted all around, mingling with the figure's eerie chorus. They whirled around me like a tempest, echoes of the king's victims, pleading for freedom, crying for vengeance. I felt their anguish clawing at the edges of my sanity, begging me to flee, to wake up from this nightmare. But where could I go? The door, the only means of escape, felt like an unfathomable abyss. Your soul is ripe, dear maiden, the figure continued, its form swirling with shadows, teasing the light while obscuring its true shape. You hold the key to the throne if you dare. What did it mean? There was understanding sealed in every horrid tale linked in that cursed diary, a conduit to the very darkness I now faced. My heart pounded as the chilling realizations that lead a choice loomed before me, threatening to unravel my being. I could either embrace the power it promised or refuse, facing the vengeful spirits of those who had come before. The air thickened further, electric with dread, as I choked back a deep breath and stepped back, instinctively clutching the diary to my chest. The figure moved closer, its hand extending toward me, a pale finger bending like an abominable branch reaching for the light. "Hear me," it purred, every word dripping with malice. "Release the binds of history, and I shall guide you." My instincts screamed in protest as I felt the icy tendrils of its presence washing over me, making my skin prickle as if the darkness were clawing its way into my veins. The candles flickered violently, as though the light itself was retreating from the horror that was unfolding. I turned to flee, desperation driving my instincts, but then a soft crack followed by a louder sound, a sickening crunch. I turned back, heart in my throat, as the floor beneath my feet splintered and heaved. Dark fissures erupted across the wooden surface, like the castle itself was awakening from a long slumber, and the shadows danced in excitement, ravenous for what was to come. The figure didn't waver. Its expression, it had no expression, only a nebulous promise of doom. "Choose wisely." With my heart pounding as though it were a drum signaling the end of days, I stammered backward, desperately searching for the door, but all semblance of sanctuary had vanished. The room closed in, the dark figure advancing, and with one final shove, I found myself teetering on the edge of the cracking floor. It felt as though the earth itself had ripped apart, another realm materializing beneath a pit of darkness yawning wide as it invited me into its depths. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony morphing into a single plea: "Join us." And just as the ground gave way beneath me, the chilling grasp of the figure reached out to claim me, pulling me from the light and into the abyss. Then, just as darkness consumed me, I felt something cold and wet press against my hand, a silver pendant, dangling from my fingers as the void swallowed me whole. It glimmered with an unholy light, the initials of the king etched into its surface, and in that moment, the whispers faded into a deafening silence. Everything went black. The blackness enveloped me like a suffocating shroud, the weight of it pressing on my soul. I could no longer discern the boundaries of my own body. Sensations swirled into a dim echo of existence, both dream and nightmare melding into one cruel tapestry. What was real? What was illusion? The silence was oppressive, filling my ears with a ringing that grew louder until it became unbearable, a siren song beckoning me to succumb. And then, out of the void, light flickered to lift a ghostly luminescence, thin and quivering like the last breaths of a dying star. I squinted against it, trying to make sense of my surroundings. I was no longer in the room with the dark figure. I stood in a vast expanse, a misty battlefield fogged with an eerie twilight. The ground was littered with remnants of decay, rusted armor, shattered shields, and beneath so many bones, bleached and twisted into grotesque shapes. A deep chill radiated through my being as the thick fog shifted, revealing half-formed penumbras, silhouettes that roamed the desolation. They looked human but were far from it. Their faces morphed, locked in eternal torment, mouths moving in silent screams. I could feel their despair as a heavy wave, drowning me in sympathy. Or was it horror? In that moment I knew, these were the echoes of the king's past. His victims. I staggered back, my heart racing. The silver pendant pulsed in my hand, warm and alive against the cold embrace of the undead realm. It was a lifeline, a remnant of hope, or a conduit to more darkness. The initials inscribed on it sparked recognition, a binding to the whispers that would not fade, and an urgency within me that swelled like a rising tide. I needed to uncover the truth. As I gazed upon the phantoms, some weeping, others wailing, I caught a glimpse of a figure beyond the mist. Tall, cloaked, it stood with an authority that pierced through the soft murmurs. It radiated malice and strength, and as it approached, the air thickened. Memories of the king's diary fused with the tangible dread, and dread turned to despair, binding me to that dreadful heritage. "What did you unleash?" A voice boomed, sending tremors rippling through the ground. It was low and powerful, reverberating like thunder. The figure stepped closer, revealing glittering eyes that promised death and retribution. "You have awakened us. I am not here to harm you," I stammered, my voice swallowed by the clamoring spirits around me. "I didn't mean to summon anything. I just wanted to know what happened. Why are you all bound to this fate? Fate?" The figure's laughter echoed like crashing iron against stone, sending a shiver of fear down my spine. "There is no fate left for mortals who dare tread in the darkness of our history. You are woven into our tale now, bound to our suffering. A sharp wind whipped around me, and I was struck by visions, flames flickering in the distance, the gleam of swords gliding through flesh, the screams of those betrayed echoing in the night. The horror enveloped me, turning my stomach. An unholy spectacle of a kingdom lost to betrayal and bloodshed, and then there it was, a flicker of movement behind the vengeful spirit, a face emerging from the shadows, pale, anguished, and familiar. My heart froze as I recognized the eyes reflecting anguish and fury, the eyes of the dark figure from the previous world. "You are the key," it spoke, its voice now piercingly intimate. "You must bear witness to the sins of this throne." The pendant in my palm became unbearably hot, scorching against my flesh as the surrounding spirits reached for it, their fingers brushing against my skin, leaving trails of frost. I felt their despair entwining with mine. Suddenly, I was propelled forward, caught between the present and shadows of the past. As I sprawled to my knees, I was thrust into a vision surrounded by echoes of laughter twisted into maniacal shrieks. A grand feast from eons past unfolded before me, illuminated by candles carved from bones, revelers with faces contorted in madness dining on the very souls of the vanquished. The echoes turned piercing, the laughter was sharper, slashing through the air. The vision tightened its grip as I realized I was one of them. I wore the same maddened glee, the pained ecstasy of their feasting on anguish. The darkest corners of my mind trembled with knowing, was this my fate too? Suddenly, a malevolent laugh broke the illusion. "Welcome, chosen one," the spirit of the king said, its voice weaving through the chaos, cold and full of promise. "You will lead us all home, back to the world of the living." "Will you join us?" I screamed, the sound unfurling into the void, as I felt myself being pulled back into the shadows, the weight of countless souls pressing down upon me, overwhelming me with despair. And then, in the midst of the chaos, the pendant shattered like glass, splintering into 1,000 glistening shards, and I felt the world crack open around me, a portal spiraling into the depths of the unknown. Then, a breath away from oblivion, the shadows whirled, and I heard the king's whisper, "Your blood must taste the throne." The darkness enveloped me once more, and then there was silence. The silence that followed was deafening, stretching on like an unforgiving eternity. With every passing second, I realized that I was no longer weightless among shadows, nor a mere observer bound by a cursed pendant. I was thrown into the very essence of this brutal history, a pawn in a game that had turned chillingly real. As my surroundings began to solidify again, the suffocating air hummed with electricity, a warning of what was to come. I found myself in the cold stone embrace of a throne room, walls towering and dark, adorned with relics of terror. Tattered banners hung low, their once vibrant colors faded into ghostly shades. The scent of iron and ash hung heavily in the air, mingling with the acrid odor of something unspeakably sinister. I glanced down at my hands and gasped. They were stained, slick with a viscous liquid that pulsed with lifeblood, hot and unrestrained. My heart thundered in my chest as the reality settled in. I was ensnared in the aftermath of a massacre. But whose blood? Was this my own destiny, or was I woven into someone else's tapestry of tragedy? A low murmur seeped through the walls, coaxing me into its embrace. The shadows flickered alive, and I felt their pull towards a figure lounging upon the grand throne. It was draped in velvety darkness, a silhouette against the dim glimmer of candlelight. Its form shifted, twisting as if it were composed of the very shadows that loomed around me. "Come closer," the figure commanded, its voice smooth, laced with a seductive malevolence. "You've already tasted our legacy. Embrace it." Against every rational instinct within me, I stepped forward, compelled by an unknown force. I was drawn to the throne like a moth to a flame. The figure's visage began to sharpen, functionality forming behind a tapestry of dark robes. Edges softened, smoothing into familiar contours a twisted parody of the king whose story had captured me. His emerald eyes flickered, gleaming as if filled with ancient knowledge and dormant fury. "You are kin to those who have fed the throne," he rasped, a cruel smile surfacing on his lips. "You carry their legacy well. With each drop that spills, the lineage flows through you, a bond that can never be severed." A sharp, overwhelming sense of dread coursed through me, mingling with anger. "I won't be a part of this. I refuse to be your vessel." He tilted his head, intrigued. "You think you have a choice? You are already tied to the bloodshed that birthed this horror. Look upon the seat of power, my child, and see what it has wrought." The shadows peeled back as if unveiling a painting tableau of agony. Flickering figures emerged around the throne, relatives, friends, and innocent souls lost to the wretched curse of ambition and vengeance. Their faces twisted in silent screams, mouths agape, eyes wide in terror as they stared back at me. Images of battle and betrayal ignited in my mind, each moment a testimony woven into the whirls of darkened lifeblood that now coursed through my veins. In that moment, the ground beneath me trembled, and I felt the pull of the king's grasp unleashed across the void of time. Images flashed, a whirlwind of chaos, betrayal, power, greed. A phantom's laugh echoed, crushing hope, as a chorus of whispers surrounded me. They beckoned, urging me to take my rightful place, ensnared in a chain of despair wrought throughout generations. No! I screamed, my voice quaking under the weight of forbidden knowledge. The intensity of their anguish became a palpable pressure, squeezing my chest like a vice. "I am not your heir," the figure on the throne leaned forward, a tempest of rage igniting in his eyes. "You will be. You cannot escape what flows within your blood. The reckoning is near, and it will demand a price." With a howl of anguish, I staggered backward, the throne room expanding around me like a vast cosmic maw. Shadows swelled, tendrils stretching toward me, grasping for my essence, pulling me into their inescapable grasp. The air rushed with chaos, and I felt myself slipping into the depths again, as screams reverberated in my mind. Suddenly, just as the darkness began to seal me within its cold embrace, the floor erupted in brilliant light, blinding and searing in its intensity. I felt the walls of reality collapse in upon themselves as visions erupted forward, images of a world without time, of kingdoms crumbling, lives extinguished, and a lone heartbeat filling the void. And then, as the pulse quickened, I was confronted by a new face emerging against the light, a silhouette familiar yet hauntingly different. Someone I couldn't recognize in the blur of pain and legacy. But those eyes, filled with fiery determination, pierced into my soul, leaving me trembling at the realization. Betrayal was not just a whisper from the past but a choice laid at my feet once more. "I will not let you go," the figure spoke, their voice cutting through the fog. "You must remember, and know that to claim the throne, you must first embrace the blood." Before I could comprehend the full weight of the warning, the light enveloped me completely, and once again, the abyss awaited. The abyss surrendered, and I fell into an uncertainty that twisted like a snake coiling around its prey. Suddenly, I collided with solid ground, but the ground itself felt wrong, pulsing under my weight like a living entity. I gasped for breath, stunned, and scrambled upright, shaking the dizzying images from my mind. Desperation coursed through me as I scanned my surroundings. I stood in what appeared to be a desolate courtyard, a stark contrast to the grandeur of the throne room I had just escaped. The night air was thick with a dense fog, swirling around a stone pedestal in the center. A desiccated tree stretched its gnarled branches above me, adorned with remnants of rotting fabric that danced like specters in the wind. Chills crept up my spine, and for a moment, I thought perhaps it was just the night air biting at my skin. But a whimper drew my attention towards the shadows that clung eagerly to the edges of the courtyard. A figure, small and hunched, emerged from the mist, draped in ragged clothing. "Help me," it croaked, its voice like splintered glass, emanating a sense of primal fear. I hesitated, instinctually taking a step back, unsure whether to trust the apparition that knelt at my feet. Yet something deep inside, perhaps sympathy, perhaps something dark, urged me to approach. Please, it whispered again, raising its face slowly, and as I raked my eyes across its features, an icy horror coiled in my gut. It was a child, though twisted and grotesque. Its skin was mottled and dripping with filth, eyes wide and hollow, and its mouth twisted in a semblance of despair. They need you, it croaked, reaching a skeletal hand toward me. You have to break the curse. Eyes narrowing, I stepped closer, stricken with pity. What curse? The words escaped my lips, filled with dread. The child pointed toward the tree, the branches twisting unnaturally against the moonlight. It feeds on the lost. Those who died for the throne, their souls there trapped until the bloodline is severed. You must understand that. I knelt hesitantly beside the wretched figure. Sever it? But how? Am tied to all this. The realization hung heavy in the air. A tainted lineage was my only inheritance. Before the child could answer, a sudden shift stole the breath from my lungs. The air thickened, and reality wobbled like a mirage shimmering in the heat. The ground beneath us crumbled, revealing a pit of darkness that opened wide, as if hell itself was yawning to swallow us whole. The child shrieked, a sound that mingled pain with a hint of relief as it sank into the depths. And oh! I screamed, my hand reaching out in vain, but I couldn't help myself. I stumbled back, my heart ripping at the sight. The shadows from the pit stretched outward, clawing for connection. What have you done? Suddenly, an echoing laugh rose from the abyss, filling the courtyard with chilling warmth, an echo of the king's voice, warped and vicious. You cannot escape what you are, child of the blood, he taunted. Join the lost. Finish what they could not. Overwhelmed by the promise of despair, I whirled around as shadows converged toward me, twirling like a sinister ballet, their forms churning with rage and anguish that clawed at my sanity. The ground quaked once more, and blood began to seep from the trunk of the cursed tree, pooling towards me like a beckoning tide. And no longer could I discern the source of terror. The courtyard erupted into darkness as specters, trapped souls, emerged, encircling me with grieved faces, each reflecting the consequences of ambition. My breath quickened as despair surged within me, and the shadows pressed closer, whispers rising into a crescendo. Become one of us, they hissed, voices mingling into a nightmarish symphony. Claim the throne. I staggered backward, heart pounding painfully as a figure materialized before me, one of the trapped souls, bright-eyed and ethereal, yet twisted with despair. You must resist. The path of blood will ensnare you. Do not succumb. The child's face flashed in my mind, a fleeting reminder of innocence swallowed whole, and with a surge of clarity, I realized I had a choice. Just as I opened my mouth to shout a defiant refusal, the ground split asunder, and a voice bellowed within the relentless darkness. Let the legacy be reborn. The chilling command echoed through the night, and suddenly, the shadows pulsed with unbearable energy, reaching beyond the walls of the courtyard, swirling into a vortex that promised destruction or rebirth. Dread clawed at my throat, and as the roots of the cursed tree began to crawl toward me, I understood I was at the brink of an unimaginable choice. And in that horrifying moment, all I could perceive was the crushing weight of blood lingering upon my hands as the darkness beckoned with a haunting melody of promises unfulfilled and a destiny waiting to be claimed. I leapt to escape their grasp, the trees closing around the courtyard, every root and branch alive, and just as I thought I could break free, something icy seized my foot, pulling me toward the void. As I fought against the pull, a blinding light erupted, illuminating a face this time, a face I recognized all too well, the figure from before in the throne room, eyes glinting with cruel intent. Welcome back, heir. And in that moment, reality fractured once more, and the darkness whispered my name. The throne room's echo still lingered in my mind, a faint vibration of despair resonating with my frantic heartbeat. But here, in the courtyard, the bell tolled louder than ever, an ominous symphony of the cursed. I clung to the remnants of my will as the roots snaked closer, their grip cold and unyielding. Stop! I screamed, wrestling against the twisting limbs of shadow that sought to draw me down. My body strained, muscles rippling with the effort. As they tugged at my foot, I felt the ground below shift once more, and panic surged through my veins. The courtyard trembled, pulsating like a heart with some otherworldly energy, and the air thickened, saturated with dread. "Don't fight it," urged the spectral figure that had emerged, an echo of hope among the encroaching despair. Its voice was strong yet trembling, imbued with a desperate essence, as though it alone stood against the darkness. "You're the last chance. You can still save them." Silence fell momentarily, broken only by the rhythmic beat of my own heart and the distant laughs of the shadows, now indulging in their macabre theatrics. The child's visage haunted me as I gazed into the eyes of the ethereal figure, the desperate promise hidden deep within its hollow features like a threat unsaid. What must I do? I found myself asking, the pulsating roots momentarily halting their advance as if yielding to my admission of fear. "Break the curse or join the lost," it whispered, reaching out with a luminescent hand toward the withering tree. "You must sever your ties. The choice is yours." Seize the dagger within the trunk. The realization hit me like ice water. The dagger, buried deep within the bark of the wretched tree, a symbol of reclamation or annihilation. I turned my gaze toward the gnarled trunk, its darkened wood glistening with blood as though it had absorbed centuries of anguish. The knife glinted faintly, as if calling my name, promising the liberation of all those trapped within its roots. "They will not let you go," the figure cautioned, its own translucent form flickering with fear. "They will fight to hold you within their grasp." As if summoned by my thoughts, the shadows surged forward, their forms contorted with a primal hunger, desperate to consume. The cacophony of tormented souls crescendoed into a howling storm, and the once still courtyard erupted into a frenzied dance of darkness. The laughter grew louder, echoing in my ears like a broken record, drowning out my thoughts. With renewed resolve, I sprinted toward the tree. My feet dashed across the soft, pulsing ground, breathing in the stench of decay and despair. Just as I reached for the dagger's hilt, icy fingers enveloped my wrist, a firm grip from the shadows wanting to pull me into their depths. "Join us!" they screamed, voices layered like a million whispering winds, rasping and gnashing without mercy. My heart hammered, indecision swirling within me like the dark mist surrounding us. For a split moment, I wavered, teetering on the brink of surrender, but the spectral figure's gaze drove me forward, brimming with urgency. "You are not meant for this fate." I tore my eyes from the darkness back to the dagger, soul screaming against the rising tide of despair. With a swift movement, I grasped its hilt, the cold metal biting into my skin. The instant I pulled it free, a pulse of energy shot through me, bright and unyielding, igniting a light that split the shadows with an unbearable brilliance. The entity around me wailed, their sorrow turning into rage as the roots recoiled, grasping for strength they no longer possessed. Yet even as I held the dagger, rays of light bursting from it, I felt a pull, a tug-of-war between the light of destiny and the dark whispers promising solace. "Sacrifice!" echoed the shadows, their voices merging into a chilling harmonization, each wail reinforcing their confounding allure. I doubled over, the weight of temptation cloaking me in sorrow, a reason to relinquish control, a chance to join the lost. So many nightmares, so many regrets now clawing at me from the abyss. I could feel the tree trembling, almost alive, and in my haste I glanced toward the specter who had guided me. Its expression shifted, eyes wide with anticipation, shimmering with an intensity matched only by the visions of what lay within that eternal night. Time stretched, the blinding light intensifying with every hawkish sound beating down from the tree, and I realized the truth: it required a sacrifice to cleanse the bloodline. My blood, binding me to the past, the throne, the very essence of the king I feared. With horror coursing within me and echoes of the child's torment piercing through, I gripped the dagger, the light siphoned into my very soul. They would not let me leave. "Take it!" screamed the darkness in unison, their frustrated voices clawing at my sanity. "Become one of us." As I stood upon the precipice of destiny, I glimpsed visions of those who had fallen before me, their faces etched with despair, the weight of their choices bearing down like a past unresolved. And as I drew a ragged breath, I faced the hollow grin of the king from the pit, his eyes vacuous voids, whispering insidiously, "You will be mine." Before I could react, the dagger ignited in flames of blinding light, illuminating the courtyard in a radiant glow that dispelled the gloom. But in that moment, the shadows surged forward with a single horrifying cry, seeking to reclaim what was theirs. What will you choose? The spectre implored, its voice razor-sharp against the crescendo of screams. Then everything erupted into chaos, light and dark colliding amidst the shrieks of the lost, the dagger's luminescence flooding my vision. I felt the roots tighten around me, slithering like snakes as the abyss swallowed the dying luminescence, drawing us into a vortex of horror. And with one final echo of the king's laughter, everything shifted, the courtyard dissolving around me, and I was plunged into oblivion once more, the choice now stripped from my grasp. As the darkness enveloped me, I whispered into the void, "Help me," and the shadows stirred, responding, but it wasn't help they offered. With an icy hand trailing upon my neck, a voice loomed from within the suffocating dark, "No one is coming for you." The chill in the air clung to my skin as I fell through the threshold of nothingness, the courtyard's cries echoing into silence. I landed hard upon a cold, stone floor, gasping for breath, heart racing with the palms of my hands pressed against the unforgiving surface. An overwhelming stench of mildew and burnt parchment assaulted my senses. My vision blurred for a moment before sharp details pierced through a room suffocating beneath endless rows of tattered bookshelves, each filled with grim tomes steeped in madness. That I rose to my feet, disoriented and trembling. The air crackled with an energy that hummed, vibrating deep in my bones, as if the very walls bore witness to every horror that had transpired within. My heart pounded with urgency, beating in tandem with the whispering shadows that swirled in the corners of the dimly lit chamber. Where am I? I stumbled forward, my fingertips brushing against the dusty spines of the volumes that surrounded me. Grim histories, arcane teachings, documents of the damned. The words inscribed on their edges twisted grotesquely as I read them, tales recounting fevers of despair, slaughtered innocents, and curses enduring to this day. A shadow flickered along the wall, and I turned, heart racing. In the far corner of the room, an ornate chair stood, crowned with a grotesque figure carved into its back, a likeness of the king, mouth twisted in a maniacal grin. It was familiar, a reflection from my nightmares. My thoughts whirled at the sight. I knew that face, had felt its haunting whisper intertwining with my destiny. A rustle broke the stillness, a summer breeze where there was none, fanning the corners of the room alive with whispers. "Do you believe you've escaped?" The voice slithered, taunting and sinister, punctuated by a cruel chuckle that echoed through the void. "Who's there?" I breathed, panic rising. "Merely a keeper of secrets," the voice crooned, growing closer, reverberating through the chambers of my mind like a haunting melody. "You've stumbled into a realm that cherishes your bloodline's pain. This is the library of the fallen where the lost pen their torments, and the living dare uncover the truth. My breath caught as comprehension dawned. The diary. It must contain the key to breaking the cycle, to releasing the souls trapped within the roots of the cursed. I bolted toward the nearest shelf, scanning the titles for anything signifying the king's reign, desperation fueling my search. Among the rows, something glimmered in the shadows, a leather-bound book sitting askew, its cover embossed with intricate designs. I grasped it eagerly, the cool leather pulsating at my touch. But the moment I opened it, a scream erupted around me, a cacophony of pain and regret pouring from the pages as the room morphed into pure chaos. Words leapt to life, writhed and twisted like serpents, wrapping around my wrists and throat, manifesting into shadows seeking revival. "You must not read it!" A voice deep within the maelstrom shouted, the keeper's warning drowned in the chorus of agony. But I could not stop. The pages revealed glimpses of the past, visions of my bloodline bound in servitude, laughter echoing frostily through banquets that turned into bloodbaths. The truth unraveling within me was agonizing, a legacy of sacrifice, the king's grotesque gluttony for power leaving a trail of lost children, lingering souls crying for vengeance. With every page turned, the shadows hissed, now swirling closer, "You tether your spirit to ours. Embrace the lineage or join us in despair." I backed away, the engulfing darkness pressing in, the very fabric of the room warping as if responding to my fear. The keeper's voice returned, less menacing, more urgent. "You possess the dagger, the key to breaking the binds of your blood. You must align it with this cursed text. Only then will your power free the lost." I clutched the diary tight, visions swirling before my eyes, terrifying glimpses of the king standing resolutely above the agony he inflicted, a child's tear falling upon the very depths of my soul. Their eyes gleamed with sorrow, locked in an eternal longing for reprieve. It was clermy bloodline led only to torment, but the shadows began to consolidate, converging upon me with ravenous hunger. All must pay the sacrifice. They rumbled, their murmurs coalescing into an impenetrable wave, the air thickening around me. Adrenaline surged as I looked from the dagger still glimmering in my pocket to the grasping shadows reaching out. I had to make a decision, and fast. Slashing through empty fear, I shouted, "No! I will not be chained by your past." My words tore through the dark, and with a thrust, I drove the dagger into the center of the book, the two powers colliding in a violent flash of light that shattered the shadows, scattering them momentarily. But then, a chilling whisper seeped through the cracks. Sacrifice unspooled, escape at a cost. The room began to pulsate violently, the guardians of darkness erupting with wrath. I felt the very essence of souls demanded as a price labeling itself upon my very spirit. Darkness crept back unrelenting, fingers curling around my heart, tightening with relentless despair. As the library succumbed to chaos, the last page bore a single line, inked in the vivid blood of the lost: to save one, another must rise in their stead. I felt the last remnants slipping away, the shadows circling tighter, unable to grasp the frail thread of light I held. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, dread weighing heavily upon me as the shadows compressed until there was no escaping them. And just as I surrendered to the calamity clawing at my being, a piercing gaze met mine, a child with ashen limbs peeking through the remnants of darkness, their whisper clear even amidst the cacophony: "You'll have to choose between redemption and festering despair. Will you save me, or claim your own throne of suffering?" In an instinctive sweep, a light began to expand around my grasped dagger, as the shadows screamed once more in desperation, and with every heartbeat, a shocking decision loomed ever closer. The pounding in my chest drowned out the chaos enveloping me. The child's eyes, hollow yet bright, remained locked upon mine, drawing me nearer with a haunting gravitas. I could sense the pull of fate, a decision burgeoning between us like the swelling tide of an oncoming storm. "Save me," the child implored again, their voice cleaving through the tumult with a shattering clarity, reaching deep into the recesses of my soul. "You know the price. The souls demand justice, but at what cost?" I gripped the dagger tightly, the chilling metal biting into my palm. Images of the king's gruesome reign flickered within my mind like ghostly apparitions, each visage a reminder of the horrific lineage I thought to escape. Yet here I stood at the edge of my own fate, a player in this wicked game of blood and shadows. "The dagger is the key," I whispered, forcing the thought as my own wavering hesitation threatened to enchain me. "But to wield it for true salvation, what must I sacrifice? What must I become?" As if reading my turmoil, the shadows shifted, growing restless and bolder. They twisted and slithered, squeezing the very air from my lungs, a cold dread gnawing at the edges of my resolve. The keeper's voice pulsated through the gathering chaos, resonating deep within the chamber. "Only through the lineage can the sacrifice transcend the pain. It is destined. No. I spat. I refused to inherit more torment. My shout resonated through the room, the words igniting a small flicker of defiance against the mounting dread. It seemed to weaken the shadows, if only for a fleeting second. I glanced back at the child, their forms shifting like smoke, and I strained against the world spiraling toward oblivion around us. "What do you mean? How can you be saved without me sinking deeper into this abyss? Your blood is what binds us," the child implored, their voice wavering with the weight of eons. "It was your legacy that opened this path. There exists a truth within the diary that can unearth a way out of this despair, but it requires a bond forged through sacrifice. You must bleed for me. Not in death, but in memory." The shadows writhed hungrily, sensing an opportunity, curling around my ankles like wolves eager to pull me into their eternal darkness. "Do not listen to the false promise," they hissed. "You belong to the darkness, and the cost of light is everlasting doom. You must offer what you have left. Become one with despair." Torn between luminous hope and suffocating dread, I felt the cracks within my spirit deepen. Time stretched and pulsed, every heartbeat slamming within my consciousness as I tried to decipher the implications of the child's words. I thought of my ancestors, the pain that whispered through their stories, their cries licking the edges of my very soul. With a trembling hand, I brought the dagger up close, starlight glimmering along its blade as it seemed to pulse with its own sentience. I will not be another instrument of torment, I roared defiantly, turning the blade toward the diary once more. The pages still writhed, sensing the latent power I held. Redemption has a taste, the child's voice echoed, an ethereal entity hovering between the light and the darkness. Claim it, let their suffering ripple through you. Heart trembling and mind racing, I plunged the dagger into my palm, feeling the ferocious sting bloom across my skin, a vivid pool of crimson weeping onto the tattered pages, the ancient ink shimmering as my blood met it. In that moment, a surge lit the library, a blinding light flashing from the pages, engulfing everything in sight. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in protest, their hunger for despair momentarily paused by the catharsis unfolding. I felt my memories intertwined with those of the shadows, visions of past sacrifices cascading around, meth screams of children lost, the suffocating embrace of darkness in eternal cycle echoing trauma. I could almost hear my ancestors plead. But as I drew connections between my blood and theirs, I felt the child twist, their shape warping as threads of destiny wove tighter around them. You must choose. Now. Am I to possess your spirit in solidarity, or merely fade within the night? And at that moment, the chamber began to shift once more, the shelves trembling and collapsing around me. With every shuddering breath, betrayal and loyalty tangled in a deadly dance, the air thickening with the weight of despair as I realized those echoes were leading toward an unimaginable truth. The throne's horror wasn't solely in sacrifice, it dwelled in exchanges eternal. No. I screamed, focusing every fiber of my will into the pulse coursing through my veins. Your fate entwines with my agony. But before the next word escaped my lips, the entire library convulsed, a thunderous crack splitting the silence as the very fabric of reality began to fray. The light surged outward, whispering promises and curses alike through time itself until darkness erupted in remorse. As the shadows lunged one last time, the room blazed with a radiance that burned like fire, a violent push against my senses, and swallowed me whole. Unseen destinies melded and torn. And just before I lost consciousness, every drop of my lineage cried out, me blood awakened something hidden, something ancient lurking deep within this cursed dimension. Choose wisely, or lose them all, echoed the final words of the child, fading against the blistering light, as my world shifted and collapsed in on itself. Darkness awakened a new horror, and I plummeted into that void, grappling with whispered promises of vengeance and freedom, clutching the dagger tightly as memory slipped away. The world around me convulsed as I was pulled into a swirling maelstrom of memories and shadows. The force of it was suffocating, entangling me in threads of terror from times long past. Moments flickered by, transparent yet orderly, like pages of a book torn loose and jumbled together, revealing scenes of each tragic sacrifice woven into my lineage. I choked, my lungs heavy with the scent of earth and rot. Suddenly, the wrenching torrent spat me out, hurling me onto the cold, stone floor of the very chamber I had fled. The air was thick, almost gelatinous, sliding painfully through my throat. I could barely breathe as I clutched my chest, trying to overcome the oppressive weight of doom that had settled over me. I lay there, a disheveled heap, my blood still smeared across the diary's pages, dark and shimmering like a living night. It felt as if the ink were writhing, a sentient substance filled with memories of past horrors awaiting to be unleashed. I struggled to my feet, my knees buckling weakly beneath me. The shadows lingered close, drawn to the power pulsing from my blood mingling with the ancient ink. A low whisper snaked through the air, carrying fragments of utterances I could not quite grasp, a warning entangled with the promise of knowledge. Open the door to your heritage. Let it flow. A myriad of voices urged, each tone dripping with a mix of lust and malevolence. I blinked rapidly, remnants of disorienting visions still dancing at the periphery of my vision. The child's silhouette flickered in the doorway. You must remember. They are waiting. The trembling light wavered, but the edges of the room darkened, suffocating the brightness. Pure instinct drove me toward the diary, fingers trembling as I brushed against its surface, half expecting the cursed parchment to recoil. Instead, a calm radiance washed over me, illuminating the air like a lighthouse cutting through fog. New pages unfurled as if drawn forth by an unseen force. In a frenzy, I began to read the script inscribed upon those virgin pages, my heart pounding to the rhythm of my lineage's heart. A horror laid bare before me. Tales of betrayal mingled with barbaric wars, offering no solace, only suffering perpetuated through each royal lineage. Visions of blood-soaked thrones flashed before my eyes, the echoes of a kingdom founded on sacrificial grains woven from pain and agony. The names of those lost, the children forgotten, their faces twisted in anguished cries, stung like barbs of the past, piercing my resolve. Then, a shadow surged forth from the corner, coalescing into the twisted form of an ancient king. He loomed above me, a ghastly figure wreathed in dark scales, crowned by a halo of flickering flames. His hollow eyes burned with malevolence, as he bared jagged teeth. "Fate has tied your heart to mine, heir," the king rasped, his voice like the grinding of stone against stone. "You cannot deny what you have awakened. The throne craves blood and justice." With icy realization, fear unfurled within me, an invasive blossom rooting deep in the pit of my stomach. I could sense his intentions swirling around me, a gaping maw of despair ready to swallow me whole. "You wish to overthrow me? To unearth the pain of my past? Flee while you still can. But mark my words, you are me, and I am you. We share a curse. No. I screamed, forcing the truth of my own will into the air, trying to sever the bind he projected into the world. "I will not become your shadow." I raised the dagger, its metallic glint reflecting the horrid specter of the king, shimmering with the remnants of my own resolve. But the shadows reacted violently, snarling and snapping like an awakened beast. They lashed out, gripping my limbs tightly, pulling me into their swirling nightmare, a suffocating embrace drawing me toward the king's vile grin. My blood pulsed violently within me, twisted remnants of my ancestors battling for autonomy against the overwhelming pressure of fate and fear. "No!" I gasped, using every ounce of strength to resist the king's whispers that sought to echo through my mind. The weight of lineage pressed down, becoming unbearable until a single voice pierced the dread and shook my very core. "Bind their ties. Instead of sacrifice, seek the truth," it screamed, reverberating from the edges of the shadows. A cascade of memories flooded my mind, entwined with the iridescence of the dagger in my grasp, each glow revealing a truth I had been blind to. The child. The weight of destiny pulled me toward a choice. Me sacrifice could also pave a path toward transparency. I glanced between the shadowed king and the encroaching blackness that threatened to engulf me whole. In that fractured instant, I realized there was something deeper, a truth that trembled beneath our collective pine and undiscovered horror that foreshadowed the unearthing of past grievances forged into the throne's curse. And before I could even comprehend it fully, the room tilted and shifted, the shadows popping with life, whispering sinister secrets as they began closing in. "Release the truth," the king howled, his figure dimming. "Your time is at hand, no!" I yelled against the chaos. But the king had licked his lips, the taste of revenge threading through the air as my heart faltered under the weight of infected choice. A crack split the fabric of the world once again, shadows rupturing from the void and revealing a doorway, a sepulchre of forgotten horror bound to my bloodline, echoing shouts from ancient souls longing for release as the child's form lurked beyond the shadowy realm. Trapped between despair and burgeoning resolve, I stood upon the brink of the abyss, knowing the truth awaited me on the other side. The price of redemption churned dangerously near, but salvation felt like a cruel joke, a light leading me to the dark. "Unravel your past. Your decision now tilts the balance." The child's voice soared through the chaos, clear like the shining blade of the dagger I clutched in my trembling hands. And as I took a step forward, drawn into the unforgiving tide, a horrifying sound echoed, reverberating like the beating wings of unseen creatures rising. The shadows parted just enough for me to glimpse endless eyes watching, waiting for my choice to plunge their fate and mine into eternity. In that moment of reckoning, as the air thickened with unholy dread, I knew that whatever lay beyond that threshold would change everything. I inhaled sharply, my blood pounding furiously, my heart an unyielding drum, and then the darkness coiled tighter around my heart, those dreaded whispers dancing around my ears, each word a warning entangled with a demand. You have opened the door. Will you close it, or step into the abyss? With one final thrust of defiance, I pressed onward into the gaping void, my very essence tremoring as I prepared to confront the horrors that would finally reveal the unspeakable truth. And as I crossed the threshold, the ground trembled, the very air shrieked in anguish, and I felt a final surge of dark energy envelop me, a chorus of voices both pleading and condemning, crooning what could only be described as the start of something absolutely unfathomable. The moment I crossed the threshold into the abyss, everything warped around me, dark tendrils coiling and undulating, twisting like serpents in a fever dream. Shadows contrasted against an unsettlingly vibrant hue, blurring the lines of reality, as if the very fabric of existence severed between us. I fell into a void of echoing silence, where fear mingled with a looming anticipation, a poisonous cocktail unfurling in the depths of my gut. I braced myself, clutching the dagger, its cold metal radiating pulses of heat, a reminder of the blood that once flowed beneath its surface. What truth do you hide? I whispered into the darkness, my voice barely audible, swallowed whole by the void. Yet, in response, the air erupted with a fluttering chaos, shrill cries and echoing laughter muddled with an ominous hum that resonated deep within my being. The shadows encroached, a swirling mass of agony, undulating with each word, conferring secrets that threatened to suffocate me. You do not understand, a voice coiled around me, slick and familiar. It was a symphony of voices possessed by my ancestors, carried through the blood that formed this grim legacy. All must pay in folly. Claim your throne, child. Their echo danced in the periphery, strength mingling with persuasion, taunting me with mirages of glistening power just out of reach. I gritted my teeth, heart thrumming in syncopation with the echoes disturbing my focus. Behind the swirling shades, amid the cacophony, I thought I saw a glint of light, a fleeting connection to something familiar. No! I will not join you! My voice pierced through the tempest, a fierce cry against the onslaught threatening to pull me under. But the shadows laughed, an ensemble of mourning, their joy twisted with vengeful wrath. You cannot escape your heritage. You must choose. Only one can rise, others are bound to fall. In that moment, I felt their hunger, gnawing at the edges of my resolve, tightening its grip around my throat. The laughter faded, a chorus tumbling into silence, replaced by a hushed reverence that cradled the weight of ancient thoughts that thrummed against my skull like a beating drum. Had I truly unlocked the core of the horror? The realization settled in the marrow of my bones. This tangled web of shadows was not merely drawn from the past but entangled within the remnants of my broken bloodline, yearning for salvation. Whispers flickered around me, the dulcet tones of anguished children, trapped souls begging for a reprieve. Free us, they pleaded softly, their voices rising through the black. Claim the dagger, for it harbors our truth. Automate the legacy or forge a new history in your blood. A pulse thudded through the ethereal space, and I sensed their presence closing in, an insatiable yearning looming ever closer. I breathed deeply, focusing not on their fervor to claim my spirit but the shimmering fragment of light I had glimpsed earlier. Igniting a spark deep within the chasm of despair, I outstretched my free hand. To my amazement, the shadows recoiled, as if repelled by the beacon of hope I was conjuring. I thought of the child and the terrible weight they carry, their life intermingled with my own choices, each sacrifice leading me here, to this pivotal moment of realization. Perhaps my blood didn't just owe a debt to darkness, it also carried the promise of breaking the curse, a break that would encompass the true face of my heritage. In an instantaneous, irrevocable decision, I gripped the dagger tighter, its hilt engraved with the promise of emancipation. My choice is mine alone, I bellowed, resolute in my conviction as the light ignited within and surged outward. I seek not power, but justice, and as the shadows writhed and hissed in defiance, consumed by rage at my proclamation, I rammed the dagger into the center of the swirling darkness before me. Time stood still, a jarring tableau as the energy erupted in a blinding flash, expectantly waiting for the dark to bleed into light. The explosion ignited a cascade of memory, illuminating the tales of struggle and sacrifice images. Washing over and through me, revealing the faces of my ancestors, the torment, and the currents binding them to the throne. The shadows shrieked, desperately retreating, but I pressed forward, determined. Each memory became a flame, igniting the haunting essence of the lost as they weaved into the very fabric of my being. Then, the silence returned, overwhelmingly thick as it enclosed me, no longer suffocating, but heavy with potential. Broken pieces fused together, the pain of the past made manifest as shadows reeled against the crumbling facade. The specter of the king rose on the distant horizon, a formidable presence equipped with anguish and rage. "Foolish child!" he roared, his voice crumbling as if splintering with each syllable, sending shockwaves through the dimness surrounding us. "You seek to unbind your bloodline? You cannot escape. It will claim you." But his voice faltered, a reflection of my gathering strength. A pulse of resilience echoed through the air that swirled around us like a tempest. I could feel it burning inside me, a constellatory existence of every choice, every sacrifice sewn together amidst oppression. "This ends now," I shouted through gritted teeth. "What have you done?" The king's anger transformed to horror. The very shadow of the throne cracked, fissures spiraling through the depths. A voracious cry of despair erupted from the fissures, echoing through the abyss as the souls that had been forgotten began to rise. The dagger quivered, shimmering with a new power, feeding on the remnants of the shadows, their anguished voices rising in cacophonous frenzy. "You chose to unbind the curse," they screamed in a chorus, their chains shattering, echoes unshackling from their haunting bonds. Suddenly their faces circled around each, a testament to the weight they had suffered, now taking flight. "Now you must lead us," the king shrieked in outrage. "No! You will pay!" But their cries eroded the very foundation he had established, felling the fortress ticking within every shadow. With renewed conviction, I drew strength from the memories of those flourished souls, unfurling around me with every heartbeat. "You will not claim me!" My voice rang clear as light engulfed the silence, illuminating the abyss, shattering the surrounding shadows. "Then let this be your end." With one final act of defiance, I turned the dagger's blade against the presence of darkness before me, severing the insidious ties binding every soul to the throne. As it plunged through the king's heart, a wild scream erupted, inescapable. Everything shuddered, the very world around us pulsating as shadows tore apart, released from the chains of torment as lingering souls ignited brighter with unforeseen light. And then, everything exhaled into silence. That I stood alone, encased in the splendor of the aftermath, eyes breathing in the loss that lingered while clarity painted the recesses of my mind. A simple truth remained undisturbed as the shadows faded like echoes in the wind. The bloodline had been coiled and bound within me, yet in reclaiming my history, I'd become its vessel for redemption, no longer merely a puppet in the dance of despair. But as the remnants of ancient darkness dispersed, a final voice called out from the dissipating shadows, with a chilling murmur like the wind rustling through the trees, "But know this, my heir. Evil never truly dies. You will carry us forever." And with those words lingering in the fabric of my reality, the chilling truth wrapped around my heart. Alarms resurfaced in my mind, reminding me nothing is ever fully severed, for my choice was a delicate reparation tethered to a bond unspoken. The past may fade, but the echoes of darkness remain entwined on a path concealed in shadows. The horror was unshackled, but in its wake, another truth emerged, echoing like a malicious whisper. I was free, and yet I knew I would forever be hunted. The shadows had not relinquished their grip. They were merely biding their time, wrapping around me like a shroud waiting for the opportune moment to resurface. And as I stepped away from the scene of horrors, the weight of the moment hung heavy on my shoulders. As the unrelenting darkness danced in the corners of my consciousness, the lingering specter of my legacy still echoed, wanting its heir back. And in that haunting silence, a dreadful certainty tightened its claws around my heart. It was only the beginning. For the real nightmare would come again from the shadows. Still, they remained,